something that you know that all I do. Hey, put your cheese came by off the shelf. Hey! Yeah, but tell you, man, I need it more. It keeps you alive, becoming to you for life. Around, man, the other side, leave my mouth, I'm gonna leave you long as it's all mine. I'm making it in the back of the car. I wanna see you, what you do, babe. I wanna see you live. I know some see you when I feel to the beat. I wanna see you when I walk up my little baby. We run around, man, the other side. We're off the bottom, I'm leaving now 'cause it's all mine. Something that you know that all I do. Hey, but you just came out of the shell. Hey! Yeah, I can tell you, man, I need it more. It keeps you alive, becoming to you for life.
Hello, Professor Bailey here. I'm here to update the original Future Pros with Future Pros 2. It's always good to know what the top riders are doing and any new techniques that they may have learned. So sit back, relax, and pay close attention so the next time you go out riding, you can use these techniques to become a better and a safer rider.
Well, I guess you could say that it all starts here. The more you know, the better rider you're going to be, and the better chance that you'll have to ride better and win more races. Good technique starts here, and it will stay with you forever. Yes, I call it Future Pros because many of the pros start here, on 50s, 60s, and 80s. So do the little guys need to do everything that the pros do? Well, most of it, only at a different level, at a different speed. They may be more limited by the size of their bike, the power, and the suspension. But as far as body position goes, it is going to be the same. Of course, if you are on a 50, there is no clutch. And with the lack of suspension, things are going to be a little bit different. And because of that, there are some things that are going to be a little bit more important for the little guys and gals. There are all levels of riders from beginners to super minis. No matter what level they are, or whether they are winning or not, every rider doesn't do everything right. Sometimes they win because they are more aggressive, and that's not always good. Doing the right things and having good form and being in control is very important. There are a lot of pro riders that don't do everything the best way or the easiest way. They work too hard trying to go fast, and that just doesn't happen because there is something missing. So let's start with bike setup, which is very important, because if your bike is not set up right, it will make it very impossible to ride in the best position, standing or sitting. First, the bars. Most mini riders run their bars around 28 to 29.5 inches. So when you buy aftermarket bars, be sure to check them and cut them if necessary. Also, don't run too tall of a bar. If the bars are so high that you can't get over the front end, to weight the front end in the turn, your corners are going to suffer. If the rider is sitting on the bike on the front of the seat and his elbows are down below the bars, it makes it almost impossible to get over them in the turn. A lot of top mini riders are using the bigger bike bars. just because they are lower and there is more variety in bars to choose from. However, because the bars are wide in the area of the crossbar, you will need to watch that so that you don't cut them too short, or you will run out of room for the levers and the grips. As far as the bend or the sweep on the bar goes, stay with the straighter ones. It'll keep you more forward on the bike and give you more control. Now that you have the right bars, don't roll them back too far. Look at the bike from the front or the back and look to see that the end of the bar is not down too far. The end of the bar should not be lower than the rise. That's the highest part of the bar. Flat would be good, and if you're a little taller, it's okay to roll them up a little bit more on the ends, but don't roll them up too far. Now for the levers. They should be somewhere between level and a 30-degree angle down so that you can get to them easily whether you're standing or sitting. It is best to keep the front brake lever down a little. However, you can raise the clutch lever up a little closer to level so it's easier to reach and to pull. This also makes it easier for the little guys with small fingers to keep one or two fingers on the lever at all times. The shift lever should be level with the pegs so that it's easy to do the upshift and the downshift. The rear brake, on the other hand, should be higher than the foot peg, so that under full braking, the brake does not go lower than the peg. If you look at your foot entering the turn, when you are in your aggressive and your attack position, with your head over the front end and your legs back, your foot is a little higher than the foot peg. This is where your brake should be. Now, as you start to brake, you won't need to change your position all that much. This will let you keep your butt back a little and help to keep your weight on the rear end. And with your knees back behind the pegs, it will be more stable should the rear end try to go side to side for any reason. At the same time, with your lower body like this and your head forward, you will have control over the front end as well as the rear. If the brake is too low, there are two problems. The first one is that your toes are pointed to the ground, and with ruts or coming up short on a jump with your toes down, that might be painful. But most important is the change in your body position entering the turn. It makes you bend your legs too much, throwing your weight more on the rear end and taking it off of the front. And that's not good because 70% of your controlled stopping is in your front wheel brake. Suspension can be a problem on the 50s and sometimes on the 60s. However, that's getting better. About the only thing that you can do on the 50s with the front end is change to a heavier fork oil to slow the forks down a little bit. And sometimes you can change the fork springs. Depending on the bike that you have, it may have a rebound control on the shock to slow it down a little bit if it's bouncing around too much. Or you can change to a softer spring or change the preload on the spring. Always check the sag to be sure that it is set for the rider's weight. You'll do this by checking your manual for the right adjustment. If you want better suspension than stock, you can send it off and have it reworked or get an aftermarket shock. If you want it right, don't just send it to anyone. Be sure that they know what they are doing and can give you the best setup. If you have adjusters on the shock, the top one is for compression and the one on the bottom is for rebound. And if you're going to adjust the rebound, turn it clockwise to slow it down and turn it counterclockwise to speed it up. For the large bumps, you will want your rebound to be a little slower, and for the small bumps, you'll want it to be a little faster. You may want to change this from track to track so that the rear end works better. If you want the bike to corner a little better, you may want to slide the forks up in the clamps a little bit. About 5 millimeters can make a difference. This will bring the steering rake in, making it turn a little quicker. Another idea, if you have a smaller rider, you can slide the forks up in the clamps, lowering the front end. However, be sure that the wheel does not hit the fender, You can also loosen the shock spring, lowering the rear end. Then for air pressure, check it regularly. Keep it around 11 to 14 pounds. The harder the track, the more air pressure. The softer the track, the less air pressure. If you go over 15 pounds of air pressure, you aren't going to get the grip on the racetrack that you should have. Before we look and talk about how to get faster and smoother, you need to be sure that your clutch is working as smooth as possible, because the clutch is a very important part of going faster. You need to keep the clutch cable and all the pivot points lubed so that the younger riders can pull it with little effort. Sometimes lubing it is not enough. Check the cable. Even if you think it is good, take it off the bike, hold it up and see if the cable drops free when you lift the inner cable wire and let go. If it doesn't, replace it. Something is wrong. Also, watch the amount of play in the clutch lever. If the rider has small hands, be sure there is plenty of free play so that he can reach it with no problem. If the lever is too far away, you can put a tie wrap around the perch, between the perch and the lever, so that the lever stays closer to his hand. And lastly, if it's a new rider, stay in a flat, open area until the rider has complete control over stopping, starting, and turning, and they have control over the clutch and throttle. No matter what level of rider, from beginner to pro, a good riding position is very important. It may even be more important to the beginner, because the right position will give you more control. Another thing that is important is brake control. Learn brake control before you ever go out on the track or on the trails. Most of the time, no one makes the young riders learn how to use the brakes. That's right, I said brakes, front and rear. You never know when or how much that you will need them. And if you are going racing, braking is a very important part of going fast. Lofting or wheelies. Most riders never learn to do a wheelie. No matter what you are on, you can still loft the front end. A loft is just a small wheelie. Even a 50cc with no clutch can loft. You just need to get over the front end, give it a little bounce, compressing the forks, then use the rebound and give it a little yank and a little bit of power. Just getting the wheel off the ground is a start. If you have tried to do a wheelie on a bicycle, that's what you want to do here. Only the front end is a little heavier, so you need to pull a little harder. Start with a small loft and just keep trying to get it higher and higher until you are doing a wheelie. At first, try doing this standing. It's a lot easier. Once you have mastered this, practice it sitting. And always keep your foot over the rear brake, so if the front end gets too high, you can tap the rear brake and get the front end back down. To get your timing, ride along slowly, pull in the clutch, put on the rear brake, compressing the forks. Then, as the forks rebound, let out the clutch, give the bars a little yank, and find the balance point. Always look for traction. You can't do a wheelie if you are spinning the rear wheel. Don't do a horsepower wheelie. Do a slow wheelie, and you will need the rear brake for that. And don't get discouraged. There are a lot of pro riders that can't do a good wheelie. It takes a lot of practice. Keep working on it, and you will get it. And just think, when you get it, you will be the baddest kid on the block or the baddest kid on the track. Now let's talk about the most important part of the race, the start. It can be 70, 80, or even 90% of the race. No matter what class you ride or what level of rider that you are, the start is very important. The closer you are to the front of the pack, the easier your job is going to be. If you have 40 riders on the gate, this will be the only time that you can pass 39 riders in 2 seconds. Plus, if you are out front, you don't need to worry about all the other riders and become a part of their problems. Besides, if you are out front, you get to set the pace. If you are back in the pack, the other guys are holding you up, and it takes time to work your way around them. And by the time you do that, the front runners are gone. The bigger the race, the more important the start is. Depending on the weather conditions, the track, that also determines how important the start is. Learn how they do the start at each track that you go to, how long they will hold the gate after they check the riders at the gate and they turn the card sideways. Next, look at the pin, the arm that holds the gate up, not the gate itself. Look for what makes the gate fall. If you can see the guy tripping the gate, watch that. The pin must move before the gate can fall. If you watch the gate, you could be late. If you are riding an automatic, be sure that you clean it out good. Have someone lift the rear end so that you can rev it up and clean it out. Just before the gate drops, hold the front brake, turn the throttle on a little, just until you feel the bike feeling like it wants to go. But don't be spinning the rear wheel. What you want to do is get the clutch closer to hookup so that when the gate drops, you don't have to wait for the clutch to take hold. Now you are ready to go, but don't forget to let out the front brake when you take off. So let's talk about 60s and 80s with a clutch. Everything here is the same as on the 125s and 250s. So get it right now and you can start on anything. First, be sure that your motorcycle is running clean. Rev it up so that it has the best power when you leave the line. Again, you should know how the start will work and watch the pin closely. Then, about 3 to 5 seconds before the gate drops, hold the front brake. Load the front forks a little so that you know the clutch is out as far as possible without spinning the rear wheel. When holding the front brake, use only one finger so that you can have good control over the throttle. RPMs should be high, almost full. This way, you will have plenty of power so that the bike won't bog when you take off. However, if it seems to break up a little on top end, back off so the power is clean. Now, remember your clutch is going to control the takeoff, so don't let it out too fast. A good rule to follow for the clutch release is to feed it about 1.5 bike lengths per gear that you are starting in. So, if you are in second gear, you will feed it about 3 bike lengths. If you are getting too much traction or too much wheel spin, make the clutch release last a little bit longer. Now, as far as your body position goes on the bike, if you were on the dirt, it will be a little bit different than on the cement. When it's a dirt start, set on the front of the seat. Keep your head forward, your arms up, and your RPMs high. If you are on the cement, move your weight back a little. Sit more mid-seat with your body more upright. You may even lean back a little depending on traction, and your RPMs will be much lower. If you want to get the best traction on cement, try this. Lower your RPMs so that you can do a small wheelie as you leave the gate. Don't worry about how fast you go off of the gate at first. Only work on traction. Once you have that, then start to be more aggressive. However, if you spin the tire when you take off, you are not going forward quickly. Practice, practice, practice. Another tip that will help you on cement is to spin the tire a little just before the start to clean your spot and to get the tire a little hot and sticky. Now, what do we do with our feet? Put them in front of the pegs. Yes, in front. Keep them in close to the frame and the pegs so that they won't fly around when you take off. If you're on an automatic, it will be very easy to leave your feet down. Don't be in a hurry to put your feet on the foot pegs. This will change your balance and your weight transfer. And why do that? If sitting at the gate you are in the best position, why change it? Stay in that position as long as possible for better traction and control. So what if you are not on an automatic and you need to shift? No problem. You can still stay in this position. Keep your feet down and locked into the pegs. Then, when you need to shift, you can grab the shift lever with the front or side of your boot so that you don't need to pick your feet up to put them on the pegs. Many of the top pros are using this way of starting now because it's better and easier once you get used to it. If you are missing gears at first, take your time shifting. Don't hurry it. Hook the lever and lift, and your boot won't slide off. I don't like this as well, but if you are having trouble getting the shift, you can try shifting with the back of your boot. Start with your feet in the same position. Then, as you take off, let your left foot move in front of the lever, shifting with the back of your boot. Only do this if for some reason the other way won't work. One more thing about your throttle, hold it steady. Don't be turning it on and off. And if at all possible, always start with both feet down so that the bike won't lean to one side. The problem, if your bike is not straight up and you spin the tire or wheelie, you are going to fall to one side, messing up your balance, traction, and control. Always grip the bike with your legs so that you are going with it when it takes off. Always lead the bike. Create forward momentum. And never use more than 2 fingers on the clutch. The more fingers, the quicker the release will be. If you can use one, it's even better. So where do you line up? Well, most of the time the inside is good so that you can control the first turn. However, you could get closed off if you get a bad start. You need to watch some other starts and see how the traffic flows through the first turn. This will help you to decide the best place to be. Also, keep in mind what kind of a starter you are, so you don't get trapped on the inside or get pushed out. If you stay just inside of the toughest competition, you can control them. If you don't like going into the first turn with all of those riders, use the outside so that you can try to sweep around. However, it's not the best place most of the time. So what about body position? A good body position. Placement on the bike is very important if you want the best control and you want to be ready when problems occur. Body position should look something like this. Arms up, out away from your body, and the legs slightly bent. However, in some cases, you may have them straight. Your head should be forward over the bars about 90% of the time. This way, you will have control over the front end of the bike at all times. And with your legs straight and your knees behind the pegs, you will have control, stability, and traction on the rear end. Stay in the middle of the bike as much as possible. The more you are in the center of the bike, the less work that you will do to get the job done. Here is an example. 2 riders doing the same section. One rider makes a lot of work out of it, while the other rider just goes with the bike using almost no energy to get the same job done. Here is another example of 2 riders with 2 different ideas about how to get through this part of the track. Too many riders think that the way to go through whoops is to hang off the back of the bike. That will keep the front end light if you keep the power on. But if you don't keep the power on all the way through, the front end is going to drop. The problem, when the front wheel drops into the face or in the bottom of the whoops, you will have a loss of forward momentum. And if there is no power, you will have a loss of control. Having control over the front end is the most important thing. By the way, you can pick up the front end easier from the front of the bike than you can from the rear. From the front end, you can pick up the front end with no power using the rebound of the forks. Body position. Stay forward with your head over the bars and create forward momentum. If you let yourself go to the rear, then when you power, you will need to get back to the front, and in order to do that, you will pull on the bars. Pulling on the bars slows some forward momentum and makes you work too hard. So if you want to have more control and go faster, stay forward. Arms out away from your body and ride on the balls of your feet, because riding on the balls of your feet is also very important. Most riders ride in their arches because it's easier to shift and to brake. So let's start with the 50s. They should stay on the balls of their feet all of the time, because many of them don't need to shift, and sometimes they don't even have a rear foot brake. So, why is being on the balls of your feet so important? For the same reason that if you were to jump up in the air and land, you would land on the balls of your feet and not flat-footed. You would land on the balls of your feet to land softer. When you jump a motorcycle or a bicycle, you need to be on the balls of your feet to help take up some of the impact. Pee-wees don't have much suspension, so if you are on the balls of your feet, it will make it a lot better. No matter what bike you are riding, being on the balls of your feet is better. The problem is that you need to shift and brake on most bikes, but that's not the real problem. It's just something that you're normally not doing, so you need to work on it. Shifting or braking, move your foot to do that, then go back to the ball of your foot. This will also make you lighter on the pegs, and you will be more defensive because you are moving all of the time and not just standing on the pegs solid. Think of it this way. A tennis player never stands in one spot. He stays on the balls of his feet and keeps some movement going. And the same with a boxer or a basketball player. Anyone that needs to be defensive stays on the balls of their feet. Races are won and lost in the corners. The speed you have in the turn says how fast you can go down the next straightaway. How well you do that turn says whether you can do that next double or not. Anyone can hold the throttle wide open on a straight. But no matter how fast you want to go in the turn, if you don't have the right technique and confidence, you're not going to do it as fast as you want or as fast as you need to. So, let's look at the things that you need to do to make your corners as easy as possible. Like every place on the track, body position is very important, and so is it in the turns. When you are entering the turn, set all the way up on the front of the seat. When you are forward, that puts more weight on the front end of the bike, making it stick better so that the front end won't wash out. Many riders set too far back, and this puts weight on the rear end, but it makes the front end so light that you can't control it in where the bike is going. And most of the time, when you are on the back too far, you will overshoot the turn. You not only need to set forward for better traction on the front end, but you need your head over the bars and your outside arm up and out away from your body. If you are not forward, this is impossible to do. Another thing that is important is to keep your inside leg up so that it won't make contact with the ground, and your outside leg should be gripping the tank. This will help you lay the bike over in the turn, and should your foot make contact with the ground, it will keep you from being pulled off of the rear. Not only should you grip in the turns, But if you keep a grip of the bike all of the time when you are riding, it will be easier to go with the bike every time that you give it power. One of the biggest mistakes made in all turns is that the riders lean the wrong way with their upper body. And this is what makes a rider go wide coming out of a flat turn and go over the top of a berm and come out of a rutted turn. Keep your head leaning more to the inside of the turn. This will keep you and the bike going more to the inside of the turn. First, let's talk about a flat turn. Well, as in all turns, keep your weight forward. And it's a good idea to keep your outside arm up and out away from your body. Weight the outside peg and keep your outside leg against the tank. Your inside leg should be up. How high? High enough that it won't make contact with the ground. Your upper body should lean in and your lower body will be on the outside edge of the seat. As you lay the bike over, you should weight the outside of the bike. The more you lay it over, the more you will sit on the outside edge of the seat. This will help put more traction on the rear end. If you also weight the outside handlebar more, you will get more traction on the front wheel as you lay the bike over. And adjust your hand on the handlebar just as you do your lower body on the seat. The clutch is a very important part of all turns. How you use the clutch in the corners is just as important as how you use the clutch on the start. Coming out smooth and fast is important. And the way you do that is to use your clutch and use it the right way. If you don't use the clutch, you are probably using too low of a gear in the turn. And in a lower gear, you may come out fast, but it will be lacking on speed. If you are in a taller gear, the bike will come out too slow. But by using the clutch, you can control the power and the traction. However, don't use your clutch so that you don't need to shift. Don't abuse it. Use your clutch to make the right gear have the best power and the best traction. Think of the corner the same as you think of the start. And feed the clutch out. Don't slip it and don't snap it out. Feed it smooth. A good rule is to feed the clutch about 1.5 bike lengths for every gear that you are in. And use the clutch on the shifts so that you won't need to back out of the power. And a little touch of the clutch will keep the RPMs up higher and keep it pulling stronger. When it comes to a berm turn, most of the things are the same as far as the outside leg goes. Grip the tank. Inside leg, you may need to keep it a bit higher because you will lay the bike over a little bit more in the berm. Your upper body, well, it should lean to the inside. That's head and shoulders. The biggest difference is your lower body will lean with the bike and not set on the outside edge of the seat. As you make impact with the berm, the bike wants to go over it or straight ahead. So you need to lean to the inside and lay the bike over to make it go where you want it to go. Earlier in the video, I talked about riding on the balls of your feet. Well, this will also help you in the turns. The more you can use the ball of the foot, the more pressure you can put on the outside peg, and the easier it is to stand up when you get out of the turn. Rutted turns are a lot like berm turns, as far as what you do with your body, upper and lower. The biggest difference is that you now have a much smaller area to work with if you want things to go perfect. In most rutted turns, there's only 4 or 5 inches to work with. If you are too low on the wall, you are going to drag the front wheel on the inside of the wall, and this will make the wheel cut to the inside, making the front end turn under. If you don't have power on, you will feel like you are going to fall, or you may go down. This will also make you dab your foot, messing up your timing and slowing your drive through the turn.
On the other hand, you need to make sure that you're not too high on the wall or you're going to go over the top. Look at the wall and stay on it with a smooth power. Don't explode the power in the turn. If you explode the power, the bike will want to stand up quickly, causing it to go wide. Pay close attention to what gear you're in. If you are in too low of a gear, you are limited to how fast you can go through that corner. Don't run out of gear before you exit the turn. If you need to shift before you've exited the corner, you're probably started out in too low of a gear. But again, don't use too high of a gear and overuse your clutch in the turn. Another thing you should be aware of is don't lock up your rear wheel going into the turn. You should not pull in the clutch going into the turn because it makes the bike freewheel and pick up speed. With the clutch in, it is also easier to lock up the rear wheel. And with the clutch in, it is hard to feel what the rear wheel is doing until it is locked up. With the clutch out, you know how hard that you are pushing on the rear brake because you can hear what the motor is doing. If you push it too hard, it will stall. In all turns, it's important that you keep a good arc and not make sharp cuts in the corner to carry a better momentum. If you are in a rut and you're running into the wall or going over it or bouncing back to the inside edge, this will upset the motorcycle, causing you to not only lose control, but you will lose momentum. Look at the wall, the outside edge of the rut, and keep your wheels against it all the way around the turn. As far as the off camber, well, you set on the seat the same as you do in other turns, forward. Now comes the tricky part. Your lower body is a little on the outside edge of the seat in the turn, just like in the flat turn. But your upper body leans to the inside, more like the berm turn. And of course, your head and your shoulders lean just like in all of the other turns. Be sure to keep your weight forward and your outside arm up and out away from your body so that you can make the bike go where you want it to go. Next comes traction. Never make a radical or quick power change on an off camber. If you do, you're going to lose traction, and there is a good chance that you could go down. Roll the throttle on and feed the clutch out so that it makes traction even if there is none. On the off camber, you need to work the front wheel a little bit, cutting it up the hill. If you don't, your bike will tend to go down to the outside. Stay loose. Work the front end up the off camber. Weight the front end. Outside arm up. Feed the power. Head and shoulders to the inside and weight the outside peg. Most riders hate off cambers and can't ride them because they don't know how. But they're not that tough, and you can gain a lot of time on the other riders if you work on it. Practice and more practice. Okay, so I've talked about the clutch. Clutch. So why is it so important? Because it makes you go faster and gives you more control. Simple. If you don't use it and use it right, it's your loss. How important is it? Well, just pick up most any motocross magazine and look at the photos of the top riders, and you will see that most of the time the riders have their finger on the clutch lever, no matter where they are on the track. Oh sure, you can find a photo or two of someone that doesn't, but come on. For the last 25 years, most of the guys that have had the number 1 plate rode with their finger on the clutch so that they would be ready to make the power perfect and to make it right when they need it. After watching riders for years, I have seen the difference in success when they learn the importance of the clutch. One is Ricky Carmichael. At first on the 125s, he almost never used the clutch. He was the fastest guy on the track, but he spent a lot of time on the ground because of the lack of control and power. Then,
when he first got on the 250s. I think that because he had all that power again, he went back to not using the clutch, and again, the bike kept pitching him off. But it didn't take him long to figure it out. But still, he would only use it sometimes. Well, I look at Ricky now that he has changed a lot of things to become very dominant. Not only did he change his training and his riding position on the bike, but he learned to use his clutch to make a stronger and a more controlled power. So, does this mean that you can't go fast without the clutch? No. That's right, you can go fast without using the clutch, but you can go faster if you use it. Sure, look back at guys like Rick Johnson, Jeff Emig, and the old Carmichael. They went fast without the clutch, but how fast would they have been if they had used it more? Well, look at Ricky Carmichael now. And remember, everyone doesn't have all the talents that Rick Johnson and Jeff Emig and Ricky Carmichael have. Some guys can win even if they don't do everything just right. Well, why not start out the right way? Learn to use the right techniques from the beginning and you won't need to play catch up later. 60s, 80s, 125s, 250s, it's all the same. If you want a stronger and a more controlled power, help it with the clutch. Now, let's look at jumping. There are a lot of different types of jumps on the track, but no matter what kind, a good body position and good technique is very important. So, let's start with a simple ramp jump. If the front end keeps dropping and you land on the front wheel, it's because you aren't giving it enough power as you go off of the jump. Here's what happens on the face of the jump. As the bike goes into the face of the jump, or the takeoff ramp, both suspensions compress. And as the front gets to the top, the forks will start to extend. If you don't have the power at this point, the front end will drop over the crest. If you are on the power, it will put the front end up into the air. Then, as the rear end crests the peak and the power was off, the front end would drop a little. Then the rear end would rebound off the top, kicking the back end up and putting you into a nosedive. However, if the power was on, launching the front end up, as the rear end goes off the crest, it will shoot the bike up and out, not letting the front end drop like a rock. The steeper the takeoff ramp, the more power that you will need to keep the front end light and in the air. There are two ways to make power: with the clutch and throttle, or just with the throttle. If you use the clutch and throttle together, you can make a stronger and more controlled power, and you can get that bark real easy. If you only use the throttle, you will need to twist it a lot harder to get the same kind of power. Plus, you will need to build a lot more speed, even if you don't want it. Sometimes you want the power and the drive and not so much speed. Sometimes you don't have enough speed going into a jump to clear it, if it's a little double or a tabletop. But with a little help from the clutch, you will have the drive and the power that you need. If the jump has a kicker at the top, it will tend to throw the front end down even more, mostly because it compresses the rear end more, giving it more rebound and kicking the rear end up. In this case, you need to give it more power going up the ramp so that the front end won't drop at the top. And most of that should happen right at the kicker at the top of the jump. When in doubt, gas it. Put power to the rear wheel. As far as your body position goes, it should be mostly forward over the jump. The more aggressive you are, the more you can be forward. The more you are forward, the more you need to be aggressive. As you approach the jump, your head should be forward over the bars. Arms up, knees slightly bent, and your finger on the clutch lever. Compress as you go into the face of the jump. Be sure that you power up the ramp. Then, as you leave the jump, rebound with the suspension. Keeping your legs straighter all the way through the jump will keep your bike at a better angle. This will let the bike stay flatter at the top of the flight. Take a small double or a tabletop. Straighten your legs all the way with your knees behind the pegs and your head over the bars. Go up and over the jump in this position and you will see that the bike will fly perfectly. And you are in the best position with the best control if everything goes wrong. But be sure that your power is right. Don't go off the top without power. And don't keep a steady power. Be sure that you have an increasing power as you leave the jump. Also, be sure that you grip the bike as you should on all jumps. If it is a ramp jump, you won't need to worry about the front end being too high if you are in a neutral position on the bike. However, if the jump has a steep takeoff ramp, you may find that the front end is a little too high. If this is the case, as you leave the ramp, stay light on the foot pegs, allowing the rear to come up a little so that the bike is flat at the arc of the flight. By the way, the best way to control the bike in the air and to be sure that you have the right bike angle for the best landing is to be sure that your bike is always flat at the top of the arc. That's at the top of the flight of the jump. No matter what the jump is, ramp, double, tabletop, downhill, uphill, the bike should be flat at the arc. If you are going to land more on the flat, stop the bike when it's flat so that it won't land too much on the front wheel. However, if it's a double or a tabletop and you are going to land on the downside, you will want to land with the nose a little more down. So, as you leave the ramp, stay neutral. Grip the bike with your legs and your feet and lift the rear end a little on the rebound, just like lifting the rear end on a bicycle if you were going to bunny hop it. Get light on the pegs and weight your bars. This will keep the front end down and let the rear end lift. No matter what kind of a jump it is, always power on the landing for the softest landing. Again, don't just turn the throttle open. Use the clutch and the throttle together so that you will have a stronger and a more controlled power for the fastest getaway. Feed the clutch as you land, just like on the start. And do it just as the wheel starts to make contact with the ground. Not too much before and not after, just as you are landing. Timing is a very important part of jumping. Time where you are going to land and how you are going to land. Always keep your bike as low as possible and keep it going forward, not up in the air. A lot of times, riders use too low of a gear on the jumps. If you are in too low of a gear, the bike will be at a high RPMs, which will compress the suspension more and give you more rebound. This can be good if it's right out of a turn and you need more lift to clear that second jump. But most of the time, the higher gear is better to stay lower to the ground. Problem? You may need to use the clutch a little so that you can stay in that taller gear. Another problem is that in the lower gear, the front end will tend to go higher because the power is so strong going up the jump. In the higher gear, the bike will soak up the jump better, helping the bike to level out. Riding on the balls of your feet is very important on the jumps. First, to soak up the impact on the takeoff of the jump. But most important for the landing. On the balls of your feet, you will get a softer landing. Just like getting up on a chair and jumping off, you're not going to land flat-footed in your arches. You're going to land on the balls of your feet. Don't let the suspension do all the work. Help it. Not only being on the balls of your feet is important, but as you land, move into the bike. Just like when you bend your knees when you jump off of that chair. If you do both of these on the landing, you are going to be softer on the pegs and your suspension will love it. And you will love it too. By the way, don't forget your arms on the landing. Because you are moving forward, you will have your weight on the bars. Use your arms to soak up the impact just like you do with your legs. Compress and rebound. Stay light on the pegs, stay light on the bars, and let the bike do the work, and you just float on the top. Don't get on the rear of the bike in the whoops or on those rough straights. Sure, you have seen riders going through the whoops, hanging off the back so that the front end will stay light. But you're just asking for trouble. If the front end drops in the bottom of one, or if you let the power off and the front end drops, you're going to have a problem. No control. Try to keep your head over the front end as much as possible, even if your butt is back. If you are tall, you can get the best of both worlds. Head over the front end for more control, and your legs back and gripping the bike more to have the rear end more stable. First, understand this. I always talk about keeping your head forward over the bars. But don't put your whole body forward, or the rear end will hop around because all of the weight is on the front. You need traction and control on the rear end as well. Remember, in the whoops or in a rough section, you want the front end light so that it will stay out of the holes or out of the bottoms. In order to do that, you need to do a small wheelie. To do a wheelie, you need traction. And the best way to get traction is to have some weight on the rear wheel. The problem? Most riders put all the weight on the rear, moving back to the rear fender. Then, if the front end drops, again, no control. Stay more in the center with your butt back a little. Remember how you do a wheelie on a bicycle. You don't hang off the back to lift the front end. In fact, if you were way on the back, you can't lift the front wheel. It's easier to lift the front end of your motorcycle if you are on top of it, over the front end, than it is to hang off to the rear. Compress the forks and use the rebound and the power to pick up the front end. Something that will help you a lot in the whoops so that the rear end won't swap and get kicked around so much is to keep your knees behind the pegs. This will give you a more stable rear end. The bike moves, swaps, and pivots from the foot pegs. And by keeping your knees behind the pegs, you can contain and control what the rear end does. Just take a look at these runs through the whoops and look at where the rider's knees are when the bike swaps and when it tracks straight. On the first run, you can see that the knees are bent and the bike is not too stable. Then on the second run, you can see that the legs are a little bit straighter, and so is the bike. It's one thing for the bike to kick up a little in the rear in the whoops, but when it starts kicking side to side, that's not good. Again, you will notice that when the legs tend to bend, at that time the bike is not as stable. This straightening of the legs not only works in the whoops, but it works everywhere. By the way, it is also easier to get into a wheelie with the legs straight and behind the pegs. The other good thing is that you not only have more control of the rear end, you also have more control over the front end if you keep your head forward. Now take a look at Jeremy McGrath. Even though his legs are a little bent, his knees are behind the pegs and his head is forward. And so is Ricky Carmichael. Then Travis is a little more with his legs straight. Bottom line, keep your knees back and your head forward. There are different types of whoops. First, the high speed. Get on the top and skip across the top. Very much like a rough, choppy straight. Here, you need to keep your bike as flat as possible. Front end light so that it doesn't fall into the bottoms. If you get the front end high, it will pull the rear end down and into the holes. This will slow forward momentum. Let the front wheel touch the top of each whoop. This way, it will rebound the forks to the top of the next one, if the power stays on. Use your clutch a little, just to be sure that you don't run out at any point through the whoops, and stay on the balls of your feet for a smoother ride. Then, there are whoops that require a little timing. This is a little more of a loft in, setting the wheel down in the right spot, and picking it up again. If this is the case, don't get too far back when you lift the front wheel, because if you are still back when it drops, you are going to get pulled over the bars when it slams the front end down. Or you may get kicked in the butt from the rear of the seat if it kicks up. Keep your head over the bars, butt to the rear a little if you need to. Carry the front wheel as far as you feel comfortable. Over 1, 2, or 3, whatever you're comfortable with. Then set it down just over the top of that whoop that you want on the back side. If you set it on the top, it will bounce the front wheel into the face of the next one, slowing your forward momentum and messing up your timing. Then you are going to get that rocking horse effect the rest of the way through. If it's right, as soon as you set the wheel down over the whoop, again, power using a little clutch and throttle, pick it up again, doing the same thing all the way to the end. No matter what kind of whoops you are going through, stay in the middle of the bike as much as possible. Don't leave the front end, and cover your rear end. Keep your arms up and out away from your body for the best control and leverage. If you are way on the back of the bike, you can't have your arms out because they are definitely too straight. You can make a lot of time on your competitors in the whoops and in the rough. Work on them and get it right. Be sure that you try different lines. Too many riders use one line in the whoops and only one line. The problem is, if that's where all the riders are going, how are you going to pass? The same goes for the rest of the track. Don't go where everyone else goes. Don't follow. If you are in the same line as the rider in front of you, you can't pass. So what's the bottom line? No matter what size bike you ride, most of the techniques are the same. Even on the 50s with no clutch, you can still ride on the balls of your feet and stay forward. You can do everything except for the clutching techniques to make the kind of power that you want when you want it. As far as 60s and 80s go, do it right. Do it right now. The better you do things now, the easier it is going to be as you move up in bike size and in classification. Get the advantage on your competition. Your gain is their loss. Their weak points can be your strong points. Some riders can talk the talk, but they can't walk the walk. But if you get the look, you're going to book. Happy trails, youngins.
Until we meet again, happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Who cares about the clouds if we're together? Just sing a song and bring the sunny weather. Happy trails to you until we meet